Hi everyone, welcome to our event on how data can supercharge efforts to lower air pollution in cities. I'm reliably informed that we have representation from up to about 50 countries today, which is really exciting. I'm joining you from a very snowy and icy London. I'm part of the European Office of Environmental Defence Fund. My name's Ollie. And actually, very timely, just today we saw air pollution caused by the burning of fossil fuels was responsible for 8.7 million deaths globally in 2018, 1 in 5 of all people that died that year. And thanks to the collaboration between scientists at Harvard and universities in the UK for that incredible insight. And of course, we're part of the digital age. You don't need me to tell you that. You're joining us live on LinkedIn. But advances in sensor technology, sophisticated calibration methods are what we're going to learn today about how we accelerate action in air pollution. But it's about getting that data, understanding it, and then using it, which is really crucial. And we're seeing examples all around the world of how people are using new technologies to understand the extent of air pollution in cities. And today you'll especially hear about our project Breathe London, which created one of the most sophisticated air quality monitoring networks at that time, but things are moving on fast. So we've got a great panel lined up for you, and just a heads up that we're absolutely going to have time for questions and answers. And I'm reliably told that after the presentations, if during the event you want to keep the questions and posting them in the LinkedIn event, then we can make sure that they get asked to the panelists at the end. And thanks to everyone who's participated in our poll on the LinkedIn page. We've seen that many of you, unsurprisingly, believe that real-time air quality data is essential to take action. But of course, there are other aspects important too about personalizing stories, for example. So just a quick piece on EDF. We're an Environmental Defence Fund. We're a pragmatic, non-partisan organization that has been going for many decades in the US and is now very much a global organization. And as I mentioned, I'm part of the European office working on our clean air initiative amongst all these other amazing initiatives related to oceans and climate and energy. And I'm privileged to be working with a lot of fantastic scientists. And our global clean air initiative lies within the health program. And we are now working around the world, for example, Mexico and China, designing and helping, especially in Mexico City, for example, help to design a hyperlocal air quality monitoring network, just as we have done previously here in the UK in London. So to kick us off, we're going to watch a short video about how sensor technology is changing the air quality landscape.
Air pollution is hard to see, and that's why it's often hard to pinpoint sources and trends to develop effective solutions. Regional pollution monitors are the norm in developed countries to help measure whether the air is healthy to breathe. These stationary monitors are often expensive and provide important information about the overall quality of air across a large area. In contrast, in developing countries, there may be few or even zero monitors to measure air quality, limiting a community's knowledge of health risks for the population. New sensor technology is changing that dynamic, allowing us to measure and map pollution concentrations block by block, and identify patterns and pollution spikes or hotspots like never before. Hyperlocal monitoring allows for a more holistic picture of air quality at a high spatial resolution and frequency. Measuring on-the-ground pollution can support a better understanding of the true exposure and health impacts of air pollution. In turn, the data can lead to targeted policy solutions or advanced regulatory actions. If you're considering a pollution research project that will benefit from hyperlocal monitoring, we've got some insights to share before you choose an approach to monitoring the air. First, you must identify which pollutant or pollutants to study based on existing air quality data. So how do you decide? Consider where you're starting from. If you don't have any air quality monitoring, it may make sense to start with a few high-quality Federal Reference Method (FRM) monitors especially if your goal is to advance regulatory actions. If you're designing a hyperlocal air monitoring network, your first key decision is to choose between mobile sensors and stationary sensors, or whether you create a hybrid network that combines the two to meet your goals. Lower-cost stationary sensor networks and mobile mapping, on the other hand, can supplement existing reference-grade equipment or serve as an alternative to reference monitoring systems for cities with limited capacity. But no matter where you're starting, the monitoring strategy should be targeted to collect the kind of data needed to answer specific questions about your air quality. Remember, your goals should guide your design. Before you consider what monitors to buy, you should develop clear and firm project goals. What does your monitoring need to accomplish and for whom? Monitoring and measuring can produce data, either general or specific, that can create awareness and urgency around pollution sources. The data can also be used to support new pollution control policies and public health programs. So ask yourself or your team, are you seeking a general survey of what air pollution exists in your city? Are you looking to measure pollution in a certain neighborhood on a block-by-block level? Are you trying to measure the impact of a discrete event or site, such as the construction of an industrial plant in a residential neighborhood, or the expansion of a roadway or airport, or an intervention aimed at improving air quality, such as low-emission zones? In this case, a before and after measurement would be key to showing impact. Develop clear project goals before you determine which approach is best for you. Common monitoring goals and objectives can be found on our website under Innovative Air Quality Monitoring. You'll also find a free downloadable how-to guide to the recommended expertise needed on your team to complete a project. Learn more at globalcleanair.org.
And it's that how-to guide that you'll be hearing much more about at today's event, thanks to my colleague Felicia, which we're actually officially launching today. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over to Matt Whitney from the Global Clean Air Fund, without whom this work would not have been possible. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you very much, Ollie, and welcome everybody. And I have to say, it's great to see so many people on this call. I've only got a few minutes to kick off the discussion, so I thought I would just touch on 3 points. Firstly, on who the Clean Air Fund is. Secondly, on why we supported Breed London. And thirdly, what my one key takeaway is from this project. So firstly, who is the Clean Air Fund? We are a philanthropic initiative that launched at the UN General Assembly in 2019. And we're here for a very simple reason, that air pollution is a major threat to global public health and yet receives just a tiny fraction of the attention and resources that is needed to fix the problem. So we're here to help to raise the funding and to support projects to help fix that. And for me, I think the key thing about air quality is that it's an entirely solvable issue. Air quality can improve practically overnight when the political will is there and when the right policies are implemented. But to achieve this, we have to have the evidence. And from very early on, in fact, from practically day one of establishing the Clean Air Fund, we knew that technology and data has a huge role to play. Because unfortunately, we've seen that where there is a lack of data, there does unfortunately also tend to be a lack of action. And one of the panelists we'll be hearing from later on is Jeremy at OpenAQ about a report that they published last year that clearly demonstrates the lack of data that exists globally, vast data gaps for locally produced air quality data, particularly outside high-income countries. And this is where Breed London comes in. So to my second point on why Breed London, we and our partners wanted to support a project that could really demonstrate the potential of new monitoring techniques to fill data gaps, to help lower the barriers and overcome the challenges that stand in their way to more widespread adoption, and at the same time provide the valuable data that can support London in tackling its air quality problem. So Breed London, in a nutshell, is not just providing data, but is also generating the knowledge that's needed to support others in deploying similar technologies all around the world. And this sharing of the knowledge is what we hope to start doing in today's webinar. So I'll let the team talk through the details of the progress made over the last couple of years, but I do urge everyone on this call to not just read the blueprint, but also all the technical annexes contained within it, because it really does condense down 2 years of innovation and learnings generated by the project into just a few pages. And I have to say to Ollie and other colleagues at the Environmental Defence Fund and CERC and all the other partners, my massive congratulations for the project and for putting the document together. It really is an absolute wealth of information. So to my last point, if there's one thing that I can take away from the Breathe London project, it would be this, that the pace of innovation is clearly accelerating rapidly. We have at our disposal more and more techniques for getting more and more air quality data. But at the same time, we can't forget that data alone isn't going to solve the problem. So I'm sure all of the Breathe London partners would agree that they would have had a much easier couple of years if all they did was produce some numbers to show how good or how bad air quality was in London and just to leave it at that. But I think the real challenge was in always pushing the innovation forward and improving the reliability of the sensors, working on the effectiveness of the protocols, on the methods and models, and continually ensuring that the quality of the data, its usability and its applicability to London's air quality management continue to improve. And so it's doing that not just for data's sake, but data that can genuinely be used to help improve air quality. And it's this pushing of the envelope that for me has been where this project has been both so successful and so challenging at times, and why I think this blueprint is such an important tool to start sharing the knowledge more widely. So I'll just finish to say that the work doesn't stop. The Clean Air Fund and our partners will continue to support projects like this that bring more actionable data to more people. And the Breathe London project itself is also continuing thanks to the ongoing support of the Greater London Authority and from Bloomberg Philanthropies. So I will leave it there. We've got a really good panel to go into the detail, and I hope you enjoy the webinar and learn lots from it. And with that, I will pass on to Felicia from the Environmental Defence Fund.
Right, thanks, Matt. So hello, everyone. My name is Felicia Douglas, and I'm a project manager for Global Clean Air at Environmental Defence Fund Europe. Today, I'm really excited to be talking to you about our new Breathe London Blueprint and technical report, providing you with lessons and insights that can support hyperlocal monitoring and accelerate clean air action. Over the next 10 minutes, I'll tell you about the Breathe London pilot project and what resources we're making available for other cities. So as Matt mentioned, EDF launched the Breathe London pilot in 2018, along with the Mayor of London, C40, and leading health and science experts, an ambitious project to develop one of the world's most comprehensive networks of its kind. The project aimed to advance both the science of hyperlocal monitoring and to help people better understand their local air quality. Breathe London combined both fixed and mobile monitoring and applied new data analytics to map air pollution across the capital. We measured fine particulate matter, nitrogen oxides, as well as carbon dioxide using 100 lower cost monitors or pods and Google Street View cars equipped with reference grade monitors. Here you can see one of those pods being installed early on in the project. There was also a linked study led by the Environmental Research Group, formerly at King's College London, that deployed wearable sensors in backpacks at several schools across the city. London's well-established existing regulatory networks provided an excellent opportunity for us to study the performance of lower cost sensors and mobile monitoring to determine their reliability and accuracy. And the Breathe London stationary network complemented and expanded upon these existing regulatory networks. So in addition to launching the project with C40 and the Mayor of London, we worked with a number of scientific and technical partners from the public sector, academic sector, and technology space. The Breathe London pilot was a highly collaborative effort, with each partner contributing unique expertise and experience. We set out to provide people with readily available and understandable air pollution data and analysis. Breathe London launched a website to serve as a new public platform with accessible hyperlocal air pollution data, including this interactive map that you can see here. So not only did we display current pollution levels, as well as historic data at each stationary monitor, we also displayed the average concentration of each 30-meter road segment that was measured by our mobile monitoring. And this was really the first time all of London's air pollution measurements, including both regulatory networks, could be found in one place. And we used this website to improve the public's understanding of the nature of pollution, That is, enabling Londoners to explore the variation across space, say as they travel along a roadway, and the daily rise and fall of pollution levels at each pod, as shown in the 24-hour graph. We also created this pollution sources layer on the map. So using modeled data that provides a source apportionment breakdown at every monitoring site. And you'll hear a lot more about the details of this model in the next presentation from Amy. But the sources layer really provided a high-level breakdown by pollution categories, such as road transport, building heat and power emissions, as well as background pollution. And we even provided a finer breakdown within each category. So for example, at the location you can see here in East London, it was estimated that 14% of NOx pollution is attributable to diesel cars. And so this information not only serves as a general awareness raising tool for the public, but for policymakers as well, providing a steer as to where resources are best focused to help tackle air pollution. So the Breathe London map was a fantastic tool to effectively engage the public in campaign groups. For example, Mums for Lungs, a local grassroots organization fighting for clean air in London, shared with us how helpful and intuitive the website was to use and how powerful it was that Breathe London not only showed how polluted the air was, but what was causing it. Breathe London data, both measured and modeled, generated really interesting analysis that allowed us to draw attention to air quality issues in the city. We were able to effectively arm local officials, other NGOs, and campaigners with pollution data and insights that led to action. We've taken our experience over the past 2 years to produce a blueprint comprised of a guide and a technical report, giving you a behind-the-scenes look at the practical details and methodology used by project partners to create a robust, real-time, and hyperlocal data set. Together, these resources provide the how-to needed for other cities to leverage lower-cost monitoring techniques and paint a clearer picture of air quality. And now, based on our experience, we recognize that there is no one solution and that not all cities will have the same resources that were available to us in London. And that's why we designed the blueprint to provide guidance and useful information for all cities, regardless of their starting point or resource level. We've split the guide into 2 parts. Part 1 focuses on replicating best practices and provides an overview of the monitoring process. And Part 2 is a case study using Breathe London and demonstrating how you can design a monitoring project that achieves specific goals. Part 1 provides guidance to help you get started. We take you through the steps needed to assess air pollution data in a city. This is an iterative process where the understanding of local air pollution continues to be refined based on new data and analysis. We guide you through the key questions to identify where data gaps exist so that you may set clear goals, design a plan to achieve those goals, generate and share robust data, and finally, to assess that data to produce meaningful and actionable findings and recommendations. We also emphasize the need for input at all steps from both the scientific community, so including air quality and health specialists, and other groups from your local communities, such as residents and businesses. In Part 1, we've also included a section on creating a monitoring plan, and we've structured this around frequently asked questions, including examples of how Breathe London approached them. So as you saw in the how-to video, a common question is, should you use stationary or mobile monitoring or both? And the figure shown here helps to demonstrate the benefits and trade-offs of stationary and mobile monitoring. The left-hand graph shows continuous data that you would have available at a stationary monitor. And this provides very valuable information on the rise and fall of pollution levels at that single location. Whereas on the right-hand side, you're looking at the data from a single segment from our mobile monitoring. And although it may not have the same depth of data at a single point, when you take all of those segments together, it provides pollution information across a much wider area. In Part 2 of the Blueprint Guide, we then use Breathe London as a case study, focused on 3 monitoring goals: finding pollution hotspots, measuring the impact of an intervention, and raising public awareness. Here we include suggestions for focusing your resources and discuss how we used the Breathe London network to achieve these goals, providing tips for how you can get started based on what we've learned, even if you don't have as many monitors as we did. And finally, the complimentary technical report, which was written by the entire project consortium, is more comprehensive than the blueprint guide and provides all the scientific details. The report tells you exactly how we executed the project, so you can try something similar in your city or learn from what we've done. We describe how we set up the network and collected data, including quality assurance and control procedures, and details of the network-based calibration method, which was developed by our partners at the University of Cambridge. We use this method to remotely calibrate the stationary network and reduce the reliance on physically co-locating monitors at different reference sites, in turn, reducing the time and resources required for that work. We also include extensive information on how we used data and models to inform policy, such as our assessment of the impact of the ultra-low emission zone in central London, how we analyzed our hyperlocal data to find pollution hotspots in the city, ones that were not previously identified by the existing reference network, emissions inventories, or air quality models. And how we use CO2 measurements alongside air pollutant data to give an indication of the types of engines and exhaust systems that generated the pollution. As one of the first pilot projects of this scale, the experience yielded a number of important reproducible tools, models, and methodologies, and you can find all of this in the technical report. I'm happy to share with you that as of today, you can find the resources we just discussed on EDF's Global Clean Air site at globalcleanair.org/blueprint. And there's also additional clean air resources like the video we watched and case studies from other global cities. And I'm now pleased to introduce you to Amy Stidworthy, one of our Breathe London partners from Cambridge Environmental Research Consultants.
Thank you, Felicia. Yes, my name is Amy Stidworthy, and I'm a principal consultant at CERC in the UK. As well as developing the Breathe London pilot project data platform, which you can now find at globalcleanair.org, we carried out detailed dispersion modelling of air pollution in London using our ADMS urban model. I've got 10 minutes to tell you about 2 years of work, so this is just a brief overview, but you can find all the detail in the technical reports that accompany the Breathe London blueprint that's being launched today. ADMS Urban probably needs little introduction. It's well known in the air quality community, and it's used in cities all over the world by a whole range of public sector, private sector, and research organisations. ADMS Urban is a dispersion model, so it's driven by information about the sources of air pollution emissions in a city, the weather, and the urban morphology. And it applies the science of air pollution dispersion and atmospheric chemistry to predict the concentration of pollutants that are harmful to our health in the air that we breathe. Dispersion models can play a key role in driving down levels of air pollution in our towns and cities. In the next few slides, I will show you how we demonstrated this in Breathe London and how you can do the same in your city. Dispersion modelling is a four-step process. First of all, you must collect the model input data for your city, which is primarily pollution source data, weather data, and information about the urban environment, street canyons, and so on. For the pollution sources, this means compiling an emissions inventory containing the locations and characteristics of your sources, their pollutant emission rates, and how they change during the day. Often the most challenging and time-consuming part of this data gathering exercise is the compilation of the emissions inventory. But the more detailed you can make your emissions data, the greater the richness in your model data set. In London, we are fortunate to have the London Atmospheric Emissions Inventory, which is published by the GLA and Transport for London. At CERC, we are also developing tools that use inversion techniques to combine modelled and measured data to derive emissions data where these are lacking or in need of improvement. The next two steps in dispersion modelling are iterative. First, we apply the model to calculate concentrations at the measurement locations and compare the measured and modelled results. Then we refine the model setup to improve the model agreement with measured data. We keep repeating these two steps until we're confident that the model is accurate. In Breathe London, this is where the static sensor data and the hyperlocal measurements were vital. And we also use the data available from the existing measurement networks in London. Refining the model means looking at all aspects of the modelling. Do we have the right emissions data? Are the locations of the monitoring site receptors in the correct location in relation to the road? Are they at the right height? Are they correctly inside or outside of a street canyon? Do we have a good estimate of the background levels of pollution? In Breathe London, this model verification process highlighted a few issues in the emissions inventory, where particular roads or junctions were missing or had unexpectedly low traffic flows. Once we're sure that the model is giving good, accurate predictions, then the final step is to apply the dispersion model to understand more deeply the problem faced by the city and to test the effectiveness of proposed solutions. Dispersion models are able to predict pollution concentrations everywhere all of the time. And these maps show modelled annual average NO2 and PM2.5 for 2019 at 10-metre resolution across Greater London. This level of detail allows problem areas to be identified and targeted for pollution reduction measures. Also, data like this is increasingly being used in health studies to look at correlations with rates of ill health, mortality, sometimes in conjunction with data on other socioeconomic factors such as deprivation. As well as understanding the spatial patterns of air pollution in a city, dispersion models help us understand the causes of air pollution. For Breathe London, we looked at the source sectors that contribute to nitrogen oxides and fine particulate pollution at schools, hospitals and care homes inside and outside the new ultra-low emission zone, or ULEZ, as well as at monitoring locations, as you've already seen in Felicia's presentation. This analysis shows, for example, how emissions from road traffic in green cause a more significant proportion of nitrogen oxides pollution, that's the graph on the left, than they do in fine particulate pollution, the graph on the right. It also shows that the underlying levels of pollution emitted by sources outside London, in the rest of the UK and Europe, in purple, what we call the background, is much more significant in particulate pollution than in nitrogen oxides pollution. It also shows that inside the ULEZ and away from the roadside, nitrogen oxides pollution from commercial and domestic heating, in red, is almost as significant as the pollution from road traffic. Dispersion modelling helps you to assess which policies will be most effective in your city. For Breathe London, we looked at the air pollution reductions that could be achieved with 3 road traffic emission strategies. Replacing all London taxis, the black cabs that is, with electric vehicles, that's in red. Replacing all Transport for London buses with electric buses, that's in green. And then both policies together, in blue. First of all, you can see that these are effective policies for reducing NO2, but not particulates. As we know from the previous slide, road traffic emissions are a less significant cause of fine particulate pollution than of nitrogen oxides pollution. Also, if you split the fine particulate pollution caused by road traffic into its exhaust and non-exhaust parts, as we did for Breathe London, we see that much of the fine particulate pollution is due to non-exhaust factors like brake wear, tyre wear and road wear. So it's not surprising that policies that target exhaust emissions appear to have less of an impact on particulate pollution. Looking at the NO2 results, you can see that within the ULEZ, where black cabs are most prevalent, changes to these vehicles have the biggest impact. The impact of the bus policy is similar inside and outside the ULEZ, so the total impact of both policies is greater inside than outside the ULEZ. If you were to do this kind of analysis at all locations across London, health researchers could use that data to estimate the health benefits these types of measures could bring. Breathe London was an exciting and ambitious project that has much to share with other cities around the world, and I would encourage you to read the blueprint being launched today, along with the associated technical reports. Also, keep an eye out for upcoming peer-reviewed publications. As modelers, we're used to using measurements to help us understand model results, but we learned in Breathe London that actually modelling and modelers can play a key role in helping the whole project team understand the measurements, which are impacted by meteorology, sensor location, proximity to pollution sources, and any local features such as street canyons, all the same processes represented in dispersion models. We learned that continual comparison between models and measurements during the project doesn't just improve the model, it also helps to identify potential problems with sensors, such as sensor failures. We learned that with careful calibration, these lower cost sensors can provide the measurements needed to verify dispersion models, and the sensors can really help identify pollution hotspots and improve the emissions data used in the modelling. Finally, it's crucial for the success of any hyperlocal or lower cost sensor monitoring project in a city that the team includes dispersion modelers, because to be successful, your team must understand the physical and chemical processes that are driving air pollution in that city. As I've said already, you can find all the details about the modelling work I've talked about today in the Breathe London technical report and associated appendices, which are now available on the Global Clean Air website. Thank you very much for listening to my talk. I'm now pleased to introduce Jeremy Taub, Executive Director at OpenAQ, who's going to tell you all about OpenAQ.
Thanks so much, Amy. I know that we don't have a lot of time and want to really leave time for questions, but I want to briefly share some lessons learned from OpenAQ, some challenges and opportunities from our engagement around air quality data with cities, communities, and a variety of stakeholders. Very quickly, OpenAQ is an environmental tech nonprofit based out of the US, but with a global reach. We've created the world's first and now largest open source, real-time, and historical air quality data platform. We got our start aggregating publicly available governmental reference grade data, working with a community of contributors and governments to make that data available on our platform. And as many of you know, and as I'll talk about later, we now have a platform for low-cost sensor data, which we see as a really amazing opportunity for increasing data coverage and filling data gaps going forward. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the key challenges that we've identified. I think that the key one that has been mentioned is this question around data gaps, and it's something that we've seen in the research that we've done, and specifically when we looked in our recent report, the Global State of Play, at data gaps and data coverage, we saw that only half of the world's governments produce air quality data, and only 4 out of 10 governments share real-time air quality data, and that we're leaving basically about 1 billion people without access to that air quality data in this case. And I think that as a related challenge, there are 30 governments that generate real-time air quality data, but they're not fully sharing it in an open manner. So that's a key challenge that we see, and it's something that we work to address at OpenAQ. And we think that it's an important conversation to be having as we look at efforts to create that, fill in those data, look at new data types, and understand how that can really lead to the action that we seek in fighting air pollution. Looking at the cities and the opportunity there, what we see is that at the city level, we've got a lot of cities in a recent report that we released with 2019 data, and we know that we actually have, which is encouraging, about 30 plus cities of the 50 most populated cities that have data on our platform. But what's still a challenge is that of those cities, the average level of, and this was a study of PM 2.5 levels, the average level is 4 times higher than recommended WHO levels. So clearly we know that there's a challenge that we see that affects many communities and areas, but that's definitely affecting cities. So just to kind of talk a little bit more about our role, as I mentioned, we have this platform that focuses on data, and we focus on really looking at data from a transparency perspective, from a data coverage, and then an access, so that we can enable people to use our data to create solutions. And then we bring together community, and we do that collaboratively to fight air pollution. On our platform currently, we have about 850 million data points, 90 countries, and we make our data available for download. Again, it's all open source from our website and via an API, and we get about 35 million API requests per month. And the work that we do isn't just about bringing on, ingesting the data onto our platform. It's about that engagement to enable action, including, as I mentioned, engagement with cities and communities. And I want to talk a little bit about that right now. So a lot of our work is on creating that engagement with cities that I mentioned. And that's really important for the success. And we've done that in a number of different places. And just a couple of examples, we've worked in the past in Sarajevo, in Accra, to bring people together around this concept of air quality data as an opportunity for convening, and have used that to then really enable and work with communities to empower them to look to create policy, to create new policies, to engage with government bodies, and ultimately to drive that change. And so in Accra, it actually led to sensor donations, it led to research and this community statement that brought people together for engagement with the government in Accra. Recently, we've been working with cities to help bring data onto our platform, so that really we can really focus on that question of transparency and make that data available to more people. So we've worked in Quito and Kigali and Bogota, as well as Mexico City and Sao Paulo. And also we've been working in Los Angeles, working with the city and NASA around air quality forecasting algorithms to predict air quality levels, and then focusing on that greater access to air quality data among local stakeholders as well as global stakeholders. So from all of that, we definitely have some lessons learned in terms of what that engagement looks like. I think that kind of when we think about it, and also I think this is some lessons learned also that I've seen from the blueprint with the Breathe London project. We've seen how engagement around data allows for the development of shared truth or truths to really assess city and community needs and find those joint solutions to combat air pollution, and what's needed. And one of the other thing that we've seen is sometimes there may be policies in place, and it could be, as in London, an ultra low emission zone that need testing, and data and air quality data allows us to do that. And sometimes we need that data to develop those policies around air quality and to look at those sources of air quality. And, and ultimately we see that it's important to think about those opportunities in both ways. The other thing that we found, and when we do our engagement with cities, is that air quality data, it matters to many different constituencies. And I know that this is something that's really part of the lessons learned that I've seen in learning from the Breathe London data and the pilot, that there's many different constituencies with a variety of technical and scientific and local knowledge across the city. And we see that air quality data is real opportunity for connection among these different constituencies. And it really helps us to fill both knowledge gaps as well as data gaps. And that's something that's important to us. And I would also add that just based on our mission, when we work with cities, that it's really important for us to just be mindful of how air quality data can empower those who are most affected by air pollution. And that they are often the greatest disadvantage. And that extends to all of our work with cities and beyond, and it's something that we think it's really important. And again, we're looking at, as we look to the future, we're looking at new ways to increase the comfort with bringing on data and new data types and increasing those opportunities for transparency, and also reducing the time that it takes for making that data available so that we can continue our work. And it's something that we're exploring through a number of our programs, extending our work through a global ambassador program, where we will have an extension of our team and work to really amplify our impact and to work with more cities and communities in new ways. But ultimately, we see ourselves as a platform, and an important one. And it's really important to understand that the data has to be backed up by the science. But we also think that it's important to remember that we also need to really make sure that we're humanizing what's going on, and to humanize our platform and air quality data. Because without that, it's going to be really hard for us to succeed. It's something that we've learned, and it's something that we are conscious of in our engagement. And I think that it all relates to the ultimate goal of changing behavior, and thinking about what that means as we engage with cities and our diverse community of stakeholders. So I want to talk now about our low-cost sensor pilot, because as we've seen with the Breathe London project, we see this as a real opportunity to leapfrog some of the impacts that we're doing to reduce air pollution by employing new and emergent technologies. As many of you know, and as I mentioned, we recently launched our low-cost sensor pilot platform in partnership with EDF, and we brought on data from EDF, including some of the Breathe London data, as well as data from 3 additional low-cost sensor partners. We expanded our platform through new visualizations and opportunities to search, including bringing on mobile data, as I said, low-cost sensor data, and we've opened up our entire archive of historical data, so that's available on this platform. So we will certainly continue to ingest and harmonize and look at the opportunities around reference grade monitors, but we also recognize that it's important to consider new technologies such as low-cost sensors, and we see the potential there to really understand how we can create a clear data picture and new opportunities for action. And we're excited at OpenAQ to expand really what this looks like and develop new tools, because we think that these technologies represent the potential to inform and amplify the impact on our platform and out in the world, and to really create the kind of what we talk about, supercharging these efforts, that is so key for us to be able to have the types of collaboration going forward. And just to say that we look forward to continuing to partner with like-minded organizations and individuals to make that happen. So I just want to finish by saying that we'd love for all of you to join us, to come and check out our website, to check out our platform, our low-cost sensor pilot platform. And we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to collaborate with you going forward. And we're excited to see, as I said, what the future looks like. And we think that Breathe London and the lessons learned there, and all the work that's going on around low-cost sensors, new forms of technology, and how that can help us to fill data gaps, overcome challenges, and identify new opportunities in this shared and incredibly important fight against air pollution, is something that we look forward to going forward. thank you, and look forward to hearing from you. I'm now going to turn it back over to Felicia.
Thanks, Jeremy. That's fantastic. I'm not Felicia, but Felicia will be joining us as well. We're going to have a panel discussion now with the remaining time on the event, and we've had some questions come through on the LinkedIn page. So if it's possible to bring back our speakers to sit on a virtual stool on stage with me, that'd be fantastic. Hello, Amy. I believe we're also going to be joined by Ramon, who's our Associate Chief Scientist at EDF. Fantastic. So we might have Jeremy as a spotlight on the event, but if we can get us all lined up, that'd be great. So I'm going to jump straight into questions because we haven't got a great deal of time, and we've had some great attendance for today's event. So if I could start with a question to Amy about some of the modeling. We had a question from Mr. Raker and also Julia Luongo, and they were asking about whether you were able to comment a little bit more about the timescales of the modeling versus the actual measurements that we were receiving through the Breathe London network. So for example, are there plans to line up the modeling in real time with the measurement data? Because it's assumed that the modeling gives you a historic average, but you're also getting this real time data at the same time. And I suppose there's a tension between the two and how that's kind of how they work together.
So in Breathe, that's right, you can do your modeling on different timescales. I mean, within Breathe London, we were sort of continually looking at the most recent data. So we weren't generally modeling in real time. We were looking at sort of a month at a time, or at the beginning, a few weeks at a time. So using the model in a historical way, there are obviously, you can use models to produce nowcasts. That's something that's often done. We didn't do it specifically in this project, but you can use models sort of on an hourly basis to produce concentration data. We do use ADMS Urban in a forecasting way, and actually Breathe London is, so we at CERC we operate an air quality forecasting system for London called AirText, which is running these models in a forecasting capacity, and Breathe London has contributed to an improvement in that because we're updating our modeling with everything that we've learned in Breathe London. So yeah, within the project itself, it was mostly looking at recent historical data on a regular sort of basis, but yeah, you can use it in real time.
Fantastic, thanks Amy. I hope that answers the question, but please comment in the event. I'm going to pass on to Ramon, who's just joined us, who's, I mentioned, that one of our Associate Chief Scientists who worked on the project. And there was a question from Mike Ahern, whether we were able to obtain stationary source background contributions during the COVID lockdown period. So I suppose to try and understand what happened during COVID.
Yes, thanks for the question. It's a really interesting one. You know, we had this unfortunate event unfold during the time that we were doing the Breathe London project, of course, with COVID lockdowns taking place, you know, sort of dramatic changes in emission patterns occurred. The main one being the transport. You know, people were in their homes, they didn't go to work, and so there were dramatic changes in emissions from vehicles. And we could see the pollution levels change almost overnight. We've done some analyses of those changes. And one of the things that we had access to, because Google was one of our partners, was data on their congestion. Congestion as collected by their subsidiary called Waze. We could see that the congestion levels went way down, just like the pollution did. And that was the main effect. But the question about stationary, of course, so now you got a dramatic reduction in the pollution from vehicles, that leaves the rest of the pollutants being emitted. And this is where, as Matt pointed out earlier, the data doesn't speak for itself, but this is where the analysis comes in. And so there's a lot of work that could be done with this data. One of the things that we've already started was because we had the model available to us, Amy had pointed out the use of the model in an inversion mode. They actually tried to simulate, well, how much did the mobile emissions have to change in order to replicate the pollution patterns? And they see that, I think it was on the order of 70 or 80% reduction in the mobile emissions, again, which is like what we see from the congestion data. But that modeling could be extended to look more carefully at the stationary source emissions, because those are going to change. The amount of combustion that's going on to heat buildings versus heat homes, so those spatial patterns are complex and could be analyzed. So there's more to be done. The data's there. We encourage people to check it out, and it's like Amy wants to add on.
Anything to add to that, Amy? Or?
Thank you, Ramon. Yes, absolutely. I was going to agree with all of that. And just to say that work is ongoing. So we are continuing to look at those changes in not just the road emissions, but also the non-road emissions in an ongoing project, which is funded by NERC, sort of building on what we've done in Breathe London. So there will be more coming out on that in the next few months. Yeah.
And watch the space. And I think Ramon helped to segue into a question for Jeremy, because Ramon was like, the data's there, please go use it and help us. And Jeremy, there was a question from Arshit Mehra in the event about how we manage the quality assurance of data when you have such a broad range of sources of data in your amazing database. And whether I think towards the end of your presentation, you talked about incorporating the lower cost sensor data. So for example, the output from the Breathe London project, and how you might flag the potential limitations of these sensors and how that gets incorporated.
No, it's a great question, and it's something that we know is raised by many people in terms of ensuring data quality and what goes into that. As it currently exists, we ingest raw data and some data that may be QA/QC'd, but we are not doing that as part of our platform. That being said, I think that it is an important question that we ask, not only as it relates to the ability of scientists or researchers or experts who are able to analyze that data themselves and do the QA/QC from the science side, but also what it means for users of our data. So I think that for us, it's something that we're very conscious of, and we're learning from over time, and figuring out the best way to figure out how that potentially could exist on our platform in a way that allows us to continue to bring on data that may be coming on at different stages of validation or QA/QC, and recognizing the importance of transparency and as that first step of making data available to then develop some additional aspects of this. So I think that it's a learning process for OpenAQ, and something that we'll continue to look to engage with a number of stakeholders on, as we have been already.
Thanks, Jeremy. I've got maybe a little bit of a quick fire question for Amy from Simon Burkett, just asking around when you were displaying the sources of PM2.5 data in the modeling, and how much of a contribution comes from outside the city, whether you can give a flavor around what is actually contributing to that 70 to 80% of PM2.5 in the model.
I think that's a very, very good question. So I think it's understood that it depends, it's different things at different times of year. So in springtime, it's known there's a lot of nitrate particles from farming and from ammonium nitrate from farming and from industrial processes. Often under certain weather conditions, you can get a lot of import of particles from Europe, from the industrial heartlands of Europe. There's sea salt in there. There'd be some Saharan dust in there sometimes. There's a whole, although those do tend to be larger particles, there are a whole range of things that contribute to that background, as we call it, And I think one of the key challenges for us going forward, especially as we further understand the impact of PM 2.5 on people's health, especially as you said, the article today about mortality is targeted regional and national action to deal with all of those sources of air pollution, which local government like the GLA or councils aren't able to tackle because the emissions aren't under their control. So it's a very good question.
Thanks, Amy. I guess there's something to be said about like measuring the mass of the particles, but then understanding the toxicity of what makes up that mass as well. Exactly.
And I think that will be an increasingly asked question going forward is, well, what is it that makes up these tiny particles? You know, can we measure them? What should we be specifically worried about, and what can we be less concerned about? Excellent. Well, we're coming to a close in the event, but I've probably got one last question to throw at you, which is thinking about replicability and other cities that might want to go on the same sort of adventure that a lot of our colleagues have been on. And this is to anyone on the panel who wants to chip in. What would you think might pop in your mind immediately that we should definitely have covered before we go ahead and implement a hyperlocal monitoring network? What might be your sort of priority, a wish that someone's considered before we go into that? If anyone wants to raise their hand or chip in. Ramon?
Sure. Well, I guess check out the blueprint, because I think that we try to walk folks through the whole thought process of undertaking such efforts. I think that the main thing that I would suggest everybody do is you know, it's easy to get sort of lured by the appeal of new technology and, you know, projects like Breathe London. And I think there's a lot that can be learned about air pollution using low-cost sensors and mobile monitoring. But I think before you get started, I think it's important to really outline, what do you want to learn, right? What is it in your city that you're questioning about? Is there some uncertainty that you want to address, or is there a specific source that you want to know more about? And I think that once you do that, you can take advantage of the technology and the new methods to sort of really delve in. But until you have that defined, you know, you might just be collecting data, but it might not be sort of fit for your purpose. So really important to start with your question.
Great. Anyone else? Jeremy?
I think I'll add to
then
that
we'll go
as well.
to Felicia. Felicia, do you want to go?
Oh, sorry. Yep. Very quickly here. Just to add to that, I think it's really important to have a dialogue established. So focusing on stakeholder engagement, making sure that you gain commitment from high-level leadership within the city, and also root the project in local knowledge. So basically have the ground up approach, and that will all lead into clearly defining and setting your goals, and making sure that when you design your monitoring network, it's really fit for purpose, and it will be able to answer those questions and meet those goals.
Thanks. And you got a final word, Jeremy, to add?
Just to echo actually what Felicia said, I think that what we've seen and what's important is making sure that the right people are at the table, so that it can be designed in a way that enables that action and creates the kind of behavior change that you're seeking. So I think that you need to ask, as Ramon said, what it is you're trying to achieve, but make sure that you're asking that with the right people at the table as well, to really inform the types of actions that are necessary for these types of initiatives to be a success.
Thanks so much. So I think we've hit time. We'll end the event there, but I'm very grateful to everyone who's participated in today's event, and to our panelist speakers just now, and to all those who took the time out to attend on LinkedIn. You can find out more at www.globalcleanair.org. And you can also get in touch with the team directly with the email address on your screen there, globalcleanair@edf.org. So thanks again for joining us, and I wish you all the best.